Chapter 1: The Wind and Sand Outside the Great Wall. Words written in front. Because the previous book, the 15th year of Chongjin, has too many chapters and is not divided into volumes, which causes some inconvenience in reading, the new book will be divided into volumes, with a total of 8 volumes, namely Zanbiatai, Heroes Chronicles, Jinling Dream, Shuzhong Road, Bega Tower, Zhang Nanchun, Helan Xue, and In the World. Volume 1: Zanbiatai. Chapter 1: The Wind and Sand Outside the Great Wall. The 16th year of Chongjin in the Ming Dynasty, AD 1643, September 22nd. The land of Central Plains. Ruzhou. It rained heavily for days, and the road was impassable. After a fierce battle, there were dead bodies and discarded baggage everywhere. In the mud, a dozen remnant soldiers who were lucky enough to break out of the tight siege were trudging hard. Kill the officers and soldiers. If you kill one officer, you will be rewarded with 1 tael of silver, 10 officers, and 1 little lady. Out of the rain and fog, hundreds of peasant soldiers with sallow faces and thin muscles suddenly rushed out. They were wearing all kinds of ragged clothes, stepping on the mud, holding up the long guns and short knives in their hands, and roaring like wild beasts. But their target was actually just a broken flag and a dozen officers and soldiers. You wrong. Go quickly. More than a dozen officers and soldiers were on foot, and most of them were injured. Only the middle-aged general at the head was riding a skinny horse. Seeing the peasant army rushing towards him, the servants around him wanted to escort him to escape, but he shook his head and shouted, "We can't walk anymore. Let's kill them together." As he said this, he took off the short bow under the saddle, opened the bow and knocked an arrow, and fired continuously. Bang, bang, bang. Every time a bowstring sounded, a peasant soldier who was charging forward would fall to the ground. But there were too many peasant troops, and the 3 or 5 fallen men were not enough to affect their impact. Seeing them rushing in like a tide, they surrounded the remaining official troops. The general returned his hand and touched it again, but the quiver was already empty. Kill out. So he threw away the short bow in his hand, drew out the long knife from his waist, and galloped his horse into the enemy group. The dozen or so servants around him also let out their final screams and followed him, staggering towards the surging enemy group, the cold swords and guns, and the ferocious faces that had changed due to hunger. The general was extremely brave, charging left and right, cutting down dozens of people in a row, but in the end he was outnumbered. More than a dozen spears were thrust at him at the same time. He could not dodge. He got off the thin horse and let out a mournful cry, knocking him to the ground. Even so, the general stood up and chopped down 2 more people, but a spear suddenly stabbed him from behind, stabbing him through the heart. The general couldn't hold on anymore, so he yelled, threw the knife, covered his chest, and stumbled to the ground. Before falling to the ground, he looked back to the northwest, tried his best, and screamed, "Shinwu, my son." Immediately, long spears and short knives stabbed and slashed at him. Because he killed so many enemies, the peasant army was extremely angry with him. They stabbed him with their spears and slashed with knives until they chopped him into bloody pulp. And the military flag with the word guerrilla written on it and the word "you" embroidered on it has already been trampled in the mud, making it difficult to recognize. More than 3 months ago, June, the 16th year of Chongjin, Yulin, father, Yu Xinwu, who had just recovered from illness, woke up from his dream, turned over and screamed, with sweat on his forehead and fear in his eyes. In the dream, not only did he see the defeat of Sun Chuanting, the governor of the 5 provinces on 3 sides of the Ming Dynasty, in Ruzhou 3 months later, but also the death of his father Yu Jianlong, the fall of Tongguan, and the fall of Xian. He also clearly saw the capture of Yulin City, the mountains of corpses and seas of blood, the Ming Dynasty, the raging fires in Beijing, the banner with a Chinese character Chuang that broke into the capital, the shadow of the palace sword, Emperor Chongjin committing suicide by hanging a branch on Maishan, and the subsequent billowing iron cavalry and the smoke rising into the sky from the 8 banners of Manchuria. To be precise, it was not a dream. Rather, it is a review of historical events that have occurred. Because he is not from this era. An extreme trip across the Northwest Desert was organized and led by him. Everything originally went smoothly, but at night, the weather suddenly changed, and the roaring, rolling yellow sand suddenly attacked their camp. There was no time to escape, and everyone was lost in the yellow sand. He originally thought that he must have hated the yellow sand and went to see the King of Hell, but he didn't expect that when he opened his eyes and woke up, he found that he had traveled backwards in time and space for 300 years through the billowing sandstorm and arrived in 1643, only 1 year after the Jiaxin incident and the fall of the Ming dynasty. In the 16th year of Chongjin, the Battle of Songjin, which determined the fate of the Ming and Qing dynasties, was over. The elites of the 9 sides of the Ming dynasty were burned to the ground. Song's Han City was destroyed. Governor Hong Qingqiu was captured and surrendered. Governor Qiu Minyang of Liaodong, General Chao Bianjiao, and Wang Tingchen refused to surrender and were killed by Jianlu. At the beginning of the year, Dorgan invaded and plundered Ningyuan. Although he failed to capture Ningyuan, he captured the Zhongyo station. Li Fuming, the former commander-in-chief of Shaanxi province, died in front of the battle. The situation in Liaodong during the Ming dynasty had been in decline again and again. Facing the invasion of Jianlu, they could not even defend themselves, and Ningyuan could not be defended. Ningyuan Governor Li Yutian and the commander-in-chief Wu Sangui took courage and jointly submitted a letter requesting to withdraw from the pass, but Emperor Chongjin refused and still ordered them to hold on. Liaodong was in ruins, and the Battle of Kaifeng, which was related to the overall situation of the Central Plains, became a jaw-dropping and unbelievable defeat. Last year, the 2 great civil servants, Superintendent Ding Chirue and Governor Yang Wenyue of Baoding, led Zhuoliang, Yuhu, Dawei, Fanggoen, and Yangde to rescue Kaifeng with a mighty force of 200,000 troops. As a result, they were encountered in Juxian town. After a major defeat, Zhuo Liangyu fled back to Xiangyang, and Hu Dawei died in battle. After Yang Wenyue retreated to Runing, he refused to surrender and was shot to death by Li Zicheng. Ding Chirue was imprisoned. From then on, the Central Plains could no longer resist Li Zicheng's soldiers. The imperial court was unable to encircle and suppress, but Li Zicheng won a great victory in Kaifeng. After controlling Henan, he could cross the Yellow River, take Shaanxi, and attack the capital of the Ming dynasty. If he retreated, he could enter Huguang and plunder Jiangnan. Therefore, Emperor Chongjin was restless day and night, forcing Sun Chuanting, who had not yet completed his military training, to quickly send troops to encircle and suppress him. Sun Chuanting, the last pillar of the Ming dynasty, the Qin soldiers under his command, the last family property of the Ming dynasty and Emperor Chongjin, had no choice but to leave Tongguan and go to Henan. However, Li Zicheng's situation has become a reality, and the world situation is already in danger. The Ming dynasty, the building is about to collapse, and it is irreversible. As a graduate of the University of Mining and Technology, he unexpectedly gave up his major after graduation, switched to fighting, and almost participated in the World Kickboxing competition. He is also a time traveler who loves history and military martial arts. He has read in detail the history books about the late Ming dynasty, including History of the Ming Dynasty, History of the Southern Ming Dynasty, and Official and Unofficial History. He had had detailed reasoning with his friends about successful strategies. When it came to depression, he had lamented the history in the book more than once, regretted the mistakes that should not have been made, and lamented the heroes whose ambitions should not have been fulfilled. He thought that if I were so-and-so, I would definitely not be so or so, and if I were the commander of this battle, I would not be so stupid. Unexpectedly, his fantasy came true. Today, he actually came to this era and traveled to another person's body. Send me yellow sand. In the first few days, he could not speak, could not move his hands, was dizzy, and was in a semi-conscious state. In the deep sea of consciousness, like a continuous broadcast of costume dramas and time travel novels. History of the Southern Ming Dynasty, the Ming Dynasty 1566, the tribulation of the Ming Dynasty, and the 15th year of Chongjin came one after another. Chapter 2, The Place of Integrity. Son, wake up quickly. A female voice kept crying beside the couch, begging him to wake up soon, and praying to Buddha and Bodhisattva. Her tears fell on his arms, cold and warm. When I opened my eyes for the first time, I vaguely saw a beautiful woman in her 40s wearing a pink heart-shaped bun and a sleeveless coat with dark red makeup and flowers. She was sitting in front of the couch, crying nonstop. Her tears rolled down like beans. She kept wiping them with a handkerchief, but the tears became more and more until a dry handkerchief was soaked through. Although he was confused, he knew that this was his mother. "Ah, son, you're awake." When her son opened his eyes, the woman screamed in surprise. Then I heard thunderous footsteps. The door frame was banged, and several people rushed in. The one who rushed to the front was an old man wearing military uniform with gray beard and hair and a red face. He kept shouting, "Baby is awake?" There is enough chi in the middle, and the sound shakes the roof tiles. While they were talking, the two men rushed to the couch and saw that the baby was really awake and looking at him with confused eyes. He bent over and looked around, his old face even more excited. "Baby, how are you? Are you feeling better?" The three people following the old man also rushed to the couch at the same time. There is also an old man on the left, with the same gray hair and beard, and a red face. He feels very similar to the previous old man's facial features, as if he was made from the same mold. The only difference is that he feels 2 or 3 years younger, a little taller, and speaks taller and more urgently. He said in surprise, "I'm really awake. Grandpa-in-law has appeared. Baby, say a word to the third grandpa. Don't just stop talking. You are almost dying of your third grandpa." With that said, he strode to the couch and put his big hand on the baby's forehead to test whether the baby had a fever. Behind them were 2 strong men. One was in his 40s, with a weathered face, a beard, and a strong build. He was wearing a warrior's uniform with red eyes. He shouted excitedly, "Woo-ah." The other man was only in his 30s, with 3 strands of beard, a wide robe and big sleeves, and was dressed as a scholar. When their eyes met, he recited a poem with joy. "Qingqiu has recovered from his illness, and when he gets up, Xiaoxiang Wuer, I know you can survive it." At a glance, the people on the couch understood that the 4 men with similar faces who rushed in were their grandfather, third grandfather, father, and uncle. The middle-aged man with the least words and a face full of vicissitudes of life is his father. When their eyes met, he could clearly feel that his father was trying his best to suppress the surging emotions in his chest. In the meantime, 2 more people rushed in, but his eyelids were extremely heavy and his eyes were blurry. He could no longer see their faces clearly. He only heard the excited voice of a young man shouting, "Brother!" The other man knelt on the ground and cried, "You are missing 1,000 households." Seeing that her son fainted again, the woman cried, "Medical officer, medical officer." There was a rush in front of the bed. When he woke up again, he felt a pair of gentle hands stroking his hair, and a kind female voice in his ear whispered about how naughty and naughty he was as a child, and how bold and near-miss he was when he grew up. As he spoke, he started crying again and finally begged him to wake up quickly and never leave on his own. If he couldn't be his mother, he wouldn't be able to survive. You shouldn't let your baby ride a horse. The horse's hoofs are the most likely to cause trouble. Someone sighed, like an uncle. Bullshit. How can we still be members of the Yu family if we don't ride horses? Don't mention those docile words in front of me. I'll be annoyed by them. Third grandpa was scolding. Then he shouted, "Second brother, I think we have to go to the Yuan temple and ask for 3 visits. How can we show our sincerity without 3 times? Grandpa responded loudly, "Then let's go and go again." Suddenly, someone outside shouted, "The medical officer is here. Please." Grandpa spoke loudly, And then there was thunderous footsteps, and the forefather, son, and brothers hurried to meet the medical officer. Once they left, other voices in the room became clearer. In addition to the mother, there was a young man standing beside the couch crying. Oh, I remembered that was his cousin Jaid Subing. Practiced riding and shooting with him outside the city. The strong man who was kneeling in front of the couch and crying had now moved to the door of the room. He could faintly hear that he was still crying. Oh, it should be the one who has been following him all the time, returning to the city with him, and was unable to stop him in time when he galloped his horse. Waking up for a while, fainting for a while, gradually, those subconscious memories were stimulated one by one, and then became clear. The memories of the two lives gradually merged. Not only did he clearly remember his previous life, but he also knew this one. Yu Jinwu, courtesy named Yunwen, is 18 years old this year. His father is Yu Jianmong, his mother is Yu Ho, his grandfather is Yu Shiwei, his third grandfather is Yu Shilu, and his uncle is Yu Jiantian. He is the 11th generation son of the Yu family, a family of generals in Yulin. Speaking of the Yu family in Yulin, everyone knew about it in the late Ming Dynasty. Not only were the three generals of the Yu family, Yu Shigong, Yu Shiwei, and Yu Shilu, respectively the generals of Liaodong, Shan Heiguan, and Ningxia. Yu Shigong died in Shenyang, Yu Shiwei and Yu Shilu had great military exploits, but also because in the 16th year of Chongzhen, Sun Chuanting was defeated and Xian fell. At that time, the new governor Zhang Fengyi had not yet arrived. Wang Ding, the commander-in-chief of Yulin, was afraid of Li Zicheng's soldiers. In the name of asking for help, he led a group of elite soldiers and abandoned the city to escape. The soldiers and horses in the city were weak, and the people were angry. Two civil servants, the right-hand envoy and the governor of the Yulin army, and the Ministry of Revenue, Wang Jielu, the minister of Pay and Pay, summoned the generals in the city and a group of veteran generals to discuss. Everyone agreed in unison that they were willing to fight. The veteran general Yu Shiwei, who was idle at home, took up the heavy responsibility and served as the coach. He spent all his wealth to recruit warriors and led the remaining soldiers in the city, which was less than 5,000, to resist defending the city. However, the defensive preparations were not yet complete, and 100,000 Shun troops had already reached the gates of Yulin City. At first, the Shun army, under the prestige of consecutive victories, wanted to persuade them to surrender. Xu Junrui, a counselor of the Shun army, brought 50,000 taels of silver to the city to persuade him to surrender, but was rejected by Yu Shiwei. The humiliated Shun army began to attack fiercely. The soldiers in the city fought with the strength of the city and fought bloody battles for 7 days and 7 nights. They repelled the attacks of the Shun army again and killed countless Shun soldiers. However, they were eventually outnumbered. The Shun army dug the roots of the city wall and used their best blow-down method to blow up the city wall and then swarmed in. The two old brothers Yu Shiwei and Yu Shilu, together with Wang Shiqin, Ho Shilu, Ho Gongji, and other Yulin generals, led the remaining troops to fight in the streets. They fought from noon to dusk, killing thousands of loyal troops until dark, when the war was over. In this battle, Shangxi Yubuzing envoy and Yulin Bingdao were both exhausted and captured. After refusing to surrender, they cursed and were executed. Wang Jielu, the Minister of Pay and Pay of the Ministry of Household Affairs, committed suicide. Peng Qing, the state magistrate, and Lu Feng, the fellow magistrate, were both unemployed in civil service in the city, and Zhang Yinhe, the former head of the household department, both committed suicide and died for their country. Lieutenant General Hui Xian committed suicide by taking poison. After the General Lu Yanjia was captured, he cursed and was cut into pieces with random swords. Ho Shilu, the former chief military officer of Xuanfu, and his son Ho Gongji were killed in street fighting. Wang Shiqin, the former chief military officer of the Shanhai Left Division, and his younger brother Wang Shiguo were captured in a fierce battle and refused to surrender, so they were executed. After Li Chongling, the former commander-in-chief of Yan Sui, was captured, he was killed unyieldingly. Yu Shiwei's cousin Zhai, when was the deputy general of the Jingbian battalion. He had followed Hong Qingqiu to defeat the invaders in Fengxiang. At the last moment, he led the death squads to rush out from the south gate and charge to the death. Although he killed many compliant soldiers, he himself was shot to death by random arrows. After the old commander Yu Shiwei was captured, he was taken to Xi'an by the Shun army. Li Zicheng personally persuaded him to surrender. Yu Shiwei refused to surrender and was executed by Li Zicheng. His younger brother Yu Shilu also died. Chapter 3: Behind the Gate. The Battle of Yulin can be said to be the most brutal defense battle in the late Ming Dynasty. More than a dozen senior generals above the rank of deputy general who had been dismissed from their posts all died and martyred their country. All officers below the rank of deputy general died fighting hard. Although the Yulin family of generals represented by Yu Shiwei were not used by the Ming Dynasty, they shed their last drop of blood for the Ming Dynasty in the most tragic form. Historical records: the Yulin defense battle started on November 15th in the 16th year of Chongzhen and was captured on the 27th. For more than 10 days, Kaiqing surrendered compared to other places where there was no resistance. Yulin can be said to be a city stained with blood in the spring and autumn, with 5,000 hearts pierced by the sun and the moon. At the end of the Ming Dynasty, there were countless people who came from Yulin and died fighting for their country in various places. Among the general ranks were Zhao Lijiao, Du Song, He Shixian, Yu Shigong, Zhang Qingyin. Yulin was really a place of integrity and discipline. In his previous life, he was a history enthusiast, especially in the late Ming Dynasty. Therefore, Yu Zhenwu has a very deep memory of the Battle of Yulin. Most of the veteran generals who died in battle were abandoned by the court due to defeat. At the beginning of the 16th year of Chongzhen, because the court lacked generals, ministers recommended many old generals who had been abandoned. Emperor Chongzhen personally summoned him at Zongzwomen. During this summons, Yulin Yu Shiwei, Wang Shiqin, Ho Shilu, Wang Shiqin's brother Wang Shigua, and Ho Shilu's son Ho Gongji were among them. But in the end, Emperor Chongzhen didn't like any of them, which was equivalent to being abandoned by the court. Although abandoned, the Yulin generals did not lose their desire to serve the country. They still repaid the court with their blood and lives in the Battle of Yulin. In real history, Yu Zhenwu either followed his father Yu Jianmong and died in battle in Ruzhou, or died when Yulin City was destroyed, along with his two grandfathers Yu Shiwei, Yu Shilu, and his second uncle Yu Jiantian. For the Ming Dynasty and this history, this is just a small drop of water, which cannot be swept up by any waves. But in this life, he changed people. Unlike the prosperity of his uncles, up to now, he is the only male in the 11th generation of the Yu family. His brothers all died